Hey everybody, this is Josh
and Carolyn
with Homesteading Family, and welcome to this week's episode of the Pantry Chat. Episode 13.
I think we're at 13, but we're not in the pantry.
No, we're not in the pantry. It's too beautiful out here to sit down in the basement in the pantry.
But what are you doing with glasses on while we're filming?
It's bright out here.
Nobody can see your eyes.
Oh man, it's bright out here.
I might be jealous of the glasses because it is really bright out here.
Yeah, it is. You want my glasses?
Put them on.
Anyways, it is episode 13, and we're going to cover, if I can say this, homeschooling on the homestead.
All right.
How do we do it? How do we approach homeschooling? So that's near and dear to our heart, certainly.
Yeah.
And so we'll get into that in a little bit, but let's get into the chit chat.
Let's get into the chit chat. Well, first of all, where are we right now? We're sitting outside. I mean, obviously we're outside. We're not in the pantry because it's too nice to sit in the basement.
Yeah, outside the barn.
But we are outside Molly's pen right now.
Yeah,
and Molly is the new milk cow. She's a Jersey that we just brought in. She's our fourth milk cow, but she's new to us now.
Yep.
So we are on kind of getting on to baby watch here, huh?
Coming there, yeah. She's starting to bag up a little bit. I bet you we got a week, but we don't know her. We've not cowed with her, so we'll see.
See how she does.
How she comes on. I hope we've got a week. I've got a lot to do, and I still have some items to get ready. So I'm hoping we have a week.
Right. Getting fresh milk from the milk cow definitely puts everything into high work category, because all of a sudden, not only do you have the milking, but you're bringing in, depending on the cow, anywhere from 2 to, we've had a cow produce 8 gallons a day for us.
Well, yeah, and it depends on the program, and that's a whole nother discussion that you guys are probably going to ask about. How do we milk? How do we go about it? And we don't know this cow yet, but hopefully at least 4 gallons a day, and hopefully not more than.
Hopefully not more than 4 gallons.
But we need that cream. I'm missing the fresh butter.
Yeah,
I am missing the fresh butter.
If any of you guys have looked for raw grass-fed butter, it is astronomically expensive. I mean, regular butter's expensive, but that kind of butter. So having it yourself is worth every bit of the work that goes on with it.
Absolutely.
So
nobody's really complaining. I mean, we get tired of milking here and there, and it's inconvenient, but fresh milk, fresh butter, all the dairy products, cheeses that we make,
and yes, we do milk by hand. I know that's going to be a question that everybody always asks when we talk about the milk cow. We do milk by hand, and the kids actually milk a lot.
We actually had a machine once, and really
we tried that.
Well, for one cow, for us, it just wasn't worth it. It was actually a nicer experience, and time-wise, by the time you dealt with the machinery cleaning it, hand milking works better. Now you go to 2, 3 cows, we'd have a different take on that. But for us, 1 cow, hand milking's great. Yeah. And
Okay.
So
what have you been up to?
I get to start. Okay. Well, let me think. Gardening, of course. Working hard to get this ground proved up for getting it ready into production, and we had some help this last weekend, and all of us were out there, and we planted up a lot of root crops, and it's just
we planted root crops. We got excuse me, what else did we get in the ground? I can't even remember what
we've now started. We do some succession beds. We've got our leafy greens in the greenhouse, of course, but now we're starting our succession beds of some spinaches, some cilantro, and some different leafy greens for fresh eating, where we plant those once a week. We'll plant a batch for continual harvest. Oh yeah. So we got those in the ground.
We got those in, and then we got the carrots, the parsnips, and the beets all
over. Okay, I thought you were asking besides the root crops.
Yeah.
But no, beets, carrots, turnips. Potatoes, and of course onions, leeks, shallots are all in, and some
peas are coming up already.
Peas are coming up. I'm gonna have to get on the trellis for those, and just being the first year setting it up the way we want it. Our first year on this ground, there's a lot of extra work that next year we won't have as much of to get this up to really functioning as a full production garden for us. And so that's good. We've been talking about that in the garden series. And if you guys haven't seen those, I'll post a link at the end to the last gardening video. And gosh, what else? Getting ready for Molly, getting prepared for her. And we've got Mom and Dad's place we're working on. So if you hear equipment in the background, there's guys out there working. And just getting ready to start a construction project for them.
Yeah, this is really like officially breaking ground right now. They're actually starting to work, so that's exciting.
It really is. So excited to be getting Mom and Dad here, and a million other things, I'm sure. So we're going at it now. What about you? What's going on?
Oh, okay. So we started moving the strawberries. If you guys have been following it all, you'll know that there were ever-bearing strawberries up here in the strawberry patch in the garden. And so we took those ever-bearing strawberries.
That's what you were doing. Did you even see the post?
I did see the post.
What are they doing to the strawberry patch?
We were taking all the strawberries out of the strawberry patch and sprinkling them around towards the kitchen garden area in a new bed with all the rhubarb and the strawberries up there, up by the house.
So did you explain why? I'm sorry.
Why? Well, because those are the ever-bearing.
Right, those are the ever-bearing.
So those we'll be able to eat off of. The kids will be able to graze off of all season. And all through the summer, right up into the frosts and even right to the hard freezes. Right. The ones we're going to put in the strawberry bed we just took the strawberries out of, we're going to put more strawberries in them, but those are going to be June bearing. Well, up here they're more like July bearing, but technically they're called June bearing strawberries, and those are going to be all fenced off. So they're sequestered so that I actually get some strawberries that the kids don't graze on, so that we can have desserts and jams and different things like that.
Well, and this is more of what we call our main crop. So it is a lot more crops that are going to have a bulk harvest. Yeah. You know, I mean, we have a few things in here that you're going to harvest over time, but a lot of it is for, you know, when this berry patch comes in or when the corn comes in, the beans, larger harvests than just that kind of browsing like you do with the ever-bearing, and so that's a more fitting place. So
hopefully we'll actually end up with some strawberries in the kitchen this year.
Right, instead of
getting
a challenge. Fresh ones are great.
So yeah, I've been working on that, and then really we're still really strong in egg season, so we've been working on that. We did a bunch of pasta yesterday, and yes, I have that video coming.
I was going to say, you're going to get a question.
I know, I have that video coming. I actually have it on the schedule to film next week, and then you can look for it the week after that being released by the time I edit it and everything. But it is on the way. So doing that, and then getting my pieces ready to make some eggnog base for this winter. So I know it seems totally the wrong season, but this is the right time to do it when you have all those eggs and they're fresh, and it just sits so nicely, and it gets better and better as it ages.
And of course, it's not just eggnog for the sake of eggnog. I mean, we love eggnog, but this is another egg preservation method, old time egg preservation method. So another way to bring some diversity into preserving the eggs.
Yeah, absolutely, and it is absolutely delicious.
Oh yeah, it is.
When you get around to Christmas time, it is perfect. So getting that put up on the shelf here in the next couple of weeks. So.
Busy. It is just cranking.
It's really busy. Okay, so we better get into that question of the week.
All right, so question of the week from subscriber Uncle Dutch Farms. You had mentioned in your last video that your kids have jurisdictions for quick cleanup. Is that separate from the daily chores? I'm really curious. I'd like to institute something similar. Let me try if I can get through that. So they're just looking for clarification in what is a jurisdiction, because what they're explaining is that when they send the kids into an area to clean up the house, there's always stuff left behind. So what do we mean by jurisdiction, and what's the expectation when they go do their jurisdictions?
Okay, so a jurisdiction is an area of the house. In our house, a jurisdiction is an area of the house.
And some outside.
And some outside, some area that you are completely responsible for. And it is different than chore time. They often do their jurisdictions at chore time, so they'll do the chores first, and then they'll go and they'll do their jurisdictions. But, you know, really the expectation changes depending on their age, but the goal for that area, as they get old enough to be capable of it, is to have it entirely tidy. And that means that you're often dealing with the, but that's not mine issue. right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is a great lesson for people to learn, is that as a family, as a team, as anything, when we're working together, we're often doing things, picking up after other people, you know, covering each other, right? And taking responsibility for areas of things that's not yours.
And it helps keep the house.
And it helps keep
clean.
the house much nicer than that. The rooster has something to say too.
That's Oscar, I think.
No, that's the boss. The kids named
That's
him.
the boss.
That's the boss.
We have
That's
a rooster named the boss.
You know, again, you can't expect what you don't inspect. So it's really important to go back through and say, hey, you forgot this, you need to clean this up, and lay that groundwork. Josh is always really good at reminding me to write out the expectations and the steps people need to take so that they know exactly what they're supposed to do. Everybody's on the same page as far as expectations. And then if there's ever any confusion, they can go back to the list and say, oh yeah, I'm supposed to do this. Or really, I can send them to the list and say, did you check all the things on your list for this room?
So like a example is the living room. Somebody has a jurisdiction in the living room. And when you call jurisdictions, their job is to go in and just tidy up. It's not a vacuum, clean dust. It's just to tidy up. But they know they're responsible to fix the cushions, pick up the dirty socks, put the book away. Doesn't matter if it's theirs, if they left it there. But they're to leave that area to a certain standard. And again, not a perfectly clean standard, but a tidy standard. And so they know going into that space, whatever you define it, that they're just going to tidy that up and get everything dealt with.
And for my sanity, I leave jurisdictions the same for at least 6 months. So I can get somebody trained on it and they can go for a really long time. And then I know that I'm not going to switch the jurisdictions. I tell them I won't change them until they have shown that they can do them perfectly.
Without reminder.
Without a long, and so that's kind of their incentive to get a different jurisdiction. Oddly enough, everybody feels like after about 3 months in their jurisdiction, that their jurisdiction must be the messiest one of the entire house. It doesn't matter what they're on, but you know.
Well, I think
I understand.
I think it's interesting though, because the older kids, they start to realize the consequences of just throwing stuff around.
Yeah.
Because they have to pick up after everybody else because it's just their area, so they see what everybody else throws down, and it starts to click, you know, what's happening when they're throwing stuff down, you know, and not caring about it. And so that's a nice lesson that gets taught in there. And the other thing is they do rotate over time, so people get experiences. Somebody was commenting on the chores video about, you know, doing different things and different gender roles and inside, outside. And yes, we do all of that. There's also a flow of productivity that has to happen. But that's one of those areas where things do swap around over time, so that, the guys are cleaning the bathroom. They're, you know, everybody is learning different skills within the house and how to take care of a house. And we're not quite as jurisdiction oriented on the outside, but we have a few of those. And that takes a little more maturity, a little older kids to really get that dialed in, because it's such a bigger, it's a bigger space. But we're working towards that as well.
And another thing to note here is that we do keep tabs on if there is a person who is just consistently throwing their coat on the floor or, you know, making a mess. You can't just expect the jurisdiction person is always going to clean up for that person. You know, you have to kind of keep tabs on if somebody is making an excessive amount of a mess. They need to go back and learn the skill of not making a mess, picking up after themselves. But this is such a wonderful practice for me. And if somebody unexpectedly drives up in my driveway, I oftentimes can call jurisdictions and then go out and meet them and chat for a minute out in the driveway and know that I'm going to walk into the house and the kids will have had a moment to just tidy up the whole space. It's really helpful. So really nice.
It really is. It takes workload off of you particularly, so that everybody's pitching in, and that's part of the lifestyle, part of our goal. And we'll talk about that here with homeschooling. And just a lot of integration in life, that everybody's working together in a flow that makes it all work, because it is a lot to do.
It definitely is. So
all right, well, thanks for that question, and I think it's time to get into topic as the clock's ticking down here.
That's right.
And homeschooling on the homestead.
All right.
So where do you want to start with that?
Homeschooling on the homestead. That, you know, that's a lot of work, but it's so rewarding. And homeschooling is just all by itself. It is such a rewarding thing because you get to know your children so much more. You get to work with them, but it integrates so beautifully with a homesteading life. It really is very nice. So
yeah, it really does.
Here in Idaho, the homeschool laws are actually very easy as far as the legalities, but of course they're different in every state. So you need to check your state laws, and you really need to follow them. You should really be following state laws for education.
Absolutely. You don't want that trouble. You need to stick with state law. And one of the things we do like about Idaho is that we have a lot of freedom. We have a lot of flexibility in how we do it.
Right.
There are requirements, but there's not the same amount of really bureaucracy that we've had to follow in other places, and that just adds another layer. And so that does make it easier.
Yeah. I would really, really suggest, though, that instead of underground homeschooling, like some people do in places where it's not legal, that you consider moving to a place where it is legal so that you can do that legally and above board, because the repercussions are not good.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. We've seen some people struggle with that.
Yeah.
And you certainly want to stay within the law.
Yeah.
And you know, a lot of people can't just move, so
right.
You know,
it's not always that
you just
simple.
have to work with what you have. But for us here, we've got a pretty good freedom that we're not having to do a lot of. We don't have to just do a lot of the extra paperwork. Is really what it is, and allows us to shape things the way we want. And so I think there's two parts to homeschooling, right? In our lifestyle on the homestead, and one is curriculum and, you know, that core, what we think of schooling or education. And then there is, how does that blend into the flow of life and our philosophy of constantly teaching and everything being a learning moment in the environment. Yeah. So you want to go? You want to dive into curriculum a little bit, because you know you're going to get those questions?
Yeah. Well, let's stay on the theory just for a few minutes longer here, because I think this is really important. That for us, one of the things that was foundational in our homeschooling and understanding how we wanted to homeschool was really igniting that love of learning in children. You know, and not squashing it by the schooling experience, but rather really expounding on that and using that for their education. And I think so much of that goes back to modeling from parents. You know, if parents love learning, then you're just modeling that excitement. And I know that was the case for me growing up, that while I didn't really enjoy school very much, I wasn't a very bright child, I guess, for the school system, the way the school system wanted me.
Well, you got brighter.
I was a late bloomer. But I would come home and my mom would be looking at pond scum under a scientific microscope, and she'd be looking up medicinal herbs to use. She just loved learning things, and that was so contagious. You know, you just got this absolute love for learning. And then once you had the tools to go ahead and start researching, you know, you understand how to use the library. Now we have the internet, all the books, all the different things. But your world just opens up and you can learn just about anything. And so I think that's just been so important to us to pass that on.
Well, exactly. You hear her passion for learning. And Carolyn knew she wanted to homeschool before we got married. I couldn't stand school. So I was like, yeah, any alternative is great, but I didn't really have a passion for it, or wasn't instilled that passion in learning. That's something that grew over time. But exactly that passion that's coming out of Carolyn is what we want to instill in the kids, and what is really the foundation to education is the love of learning. If we can teach them to love to learn, yes, we need to get in and we'll talk about curriculum and a little bit about core subjects and whatnot, but if they can love to learn and have that passion that you got from your mom and that you definitely have, they can learn anything and they can do anything in this life if they love to learn. And you know, often, unfortunately, the schooling system squashes that for a lot of people. For a lot of people. And so that's at the heart of everything we do, is wanting people to love to learn, and then finding what's their passion, what's their, you know, God-given gift. What are they natural at, and then love to learn, and you really can go do anything. And so that's incorporating it into all of life and making learning hopefully fun and interesting. Yeah.
Well, and that's where that homesteading just really kicks off, really complements homeschooling, because you're always learning something new, right? Whether it's, even if you've been gardening for 20 years, there's always some new pest that shows up, or some new problem, or something that you want to do,
or some new variety that you have to try.
Some new variety.
Some new unusual far.
That's me. I always want to try something new, but you know, so there's always something to learn, whether it's making soap in a new skill, or a new animal, or a new plant. There's always something there that you can really capitalize on to teach your children that love of learning.
Yeah, and so to start to move away from theory a little bit into, because we've got a time limit and we definitely want to get to a little bit of the structure. That starts with looking for teaching moments and building teaching moments in throughout life and throughout the day, not just at school time. And there's a school time, and Carolyn will get into that here in a second, but also setting up, you know, other times. And the breakfast table is one for us. That's our gathering time, our family time, more evening dinner too, but more breakfast because we're all together, we're all fresh.
Right.
And so we have specific times that are more casual. I was wondering, you need my hat? I think,
it's kind of bright.
Boy, you look good. You look good in that.
Thank you.
Okay,
now you've got hat.
Hey, doesn't she look pretty?
That's a public display of affection. We're not supposed to do that.
So there are times built in to our day, the meal time being one of them, and really it's what works for you, but where there's light instruction. You know, in the morning times we often do geography. That's everything from the little people to what room are we in, the rooms of the house, to where do we live, what's geographical features, on to right now with some of the older kids, we're covering some of the countries on the continent of North America that they didn't know about.
Right.
And on. And that can be done casually, but it's still teaching and it's fun.
Yeah.
And so building those into different places the day around your core school time.
Right.
And then of course the other part is just being together, doing life and looking for opportunities. And that's actually harder because that takes being in the moment and it takes intention.
Yeah.
But whether you're in the garden or you're working with animals and drawing out principles or values that you see inside what you're doing and relating those to the children.
Yeah.
So that is something that's hopefully happening all of the time. And then that little bit of structure on the fringes. And then we move toward, you know, what would be core, what we'd call schooling. Right?
Yeah.
And you've got kind of a theory and a way about doing things that you've developed over the years.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think in all of that, you were talking about starting with the little guys, and that's just so important, you know, just having them with you for everything you're doing. That teaching them to become independent, right? Always moving somebody to becoming independent, because I find myself saying I'm raising men and women. I'm not raising children, because I want to end up with men and women at the end. I don't want to end up with these perennial children. That's kind of a societal problem we have right now.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And so even in their schooling, we need to move them towards taking responsibility for their own education and being able to move through things by themselves. And really that's that teaching them how to learn. So we look to do that with the curriculum choices, with everything from as early on as possible. Now that doesn't mean we throw a curriculum book at them and walk away. It means that we're slowly transitioning them to being able to building the skills it takes to do that. So, you know, one of the things that you really start with really hard in our family is reading the directions. Don't ask me until you've read the directions over, you know, and so really teaching people the skills of doing that. Now, when you're teaching them those skills, it means that you have different curriculum options than you do if you're in, say, a big public school classroom and you're teaching 30 kids and you need to really hold their hand through everything. The reason for that is there's a lot of really great curriculum out there that's designed for independent use. And so we want to transition into that type of curriculum as soon as possible, so that, you know, when we're teaching as many different grades as we're teaching in our house, people are able to just go and do their thing and be learning and then just be checking in rather than needing to have full lessons taught to them.
So besides preschool, and we're going to have to move through a little bit here and answer a few probably harder curriculum just because people are going to ask. So, you know, you've got preschool and there's a lot of little things happening there, engaging people. But moving into formal education as you were, one of the things that you do is get them reading.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
If they're going to know the directions, they've got to be able to
Yes.
read. And so having a reading program, and we always read and tried from, the kids had books as toys, a large part of their toys, because we read so much. So they've already got this desire to read. But then part of the first part of schooling for them was really starting to learn how to read very, very intentionally.
Yeah.
And I think you have a program that has really worked well. And that's kind of the foundation of the beginning, right, of their formal education to be able to do what you're talking about.
Yes, and I know a lot of moms who are just getting into homeschooling with their young children, they end up trying to put in like so many different subjects just when a child's entering kindergarten range, and it just becomes overwhelming. And we really make sure that there is a foundation of reading before we start making anything else too formal. So we start with the Teach Your Child to Read in 100 Easy Lessons, and that has just been so incredibly good for our family. Usually by lesson 80, they are off in reading books all completely by themselves. And that we just work through as soon as a child asks me, can I learn to read? Which some of them, it's 4 years old that they start asking that.
Yeah,
and
they're wanting to start that book.
They want to be a big kid and do the big kid thing.
Yeah.
And so, you know, at ages that are that early, I don't even push to get through a whole lesson. I just do it while they're interested, and then when they're not interested, then we just stop. And I know, hey, I can always start the 100 Easy Lessons over again if we need to take a break for a while. But by the time somebody's getting to 6 years old, somewhere in there, we need to start actually moving through at least a lesson a day and learning to read solidly. So that becomes the basis of everything, because once you can read, you can do just about anything.
Well, and the kids have really, everybody's a little different how they move through that. Some of them have really early wanted to do that, and man, they're moving through it. And by the time they're 6, they're reading pretty well. It's impressive. Other ones are, you know, by the time they get to 6, you're having to help move them along, and they get on track and they get going just fine. But that's been a great book in my observation that has really given everybody a love of reading. That has worked well. Yeah. And so, are there a couple other, do you want to cover any other subjects? Because people are going to ask about curriculum a little bit. I know that's big, and you've kind of cowboyed it in curriculum. She's experimented over the years and found different curriculums for different subjects that work well for us. And so
I have tried all different curriculums, and you know, I have just landed pretty solidly back at some of the Mennonite and Amish based curriculums. And I have a few examples of them, but thank you. Yep. the dog's sitting down here, and I think he'd like my coffee if I set it down. But
Luke's asking to get in the picture.
Yeah, he'd like to do that. So some of these, while they don't generally have a lot of religious type training in them, but they're really geared towards communities that are living a much more agrarian-based lifestyle.
Which, of course, so that relates to us a lot.
So the kids really closely relate to what, you know, the stories about getting eggs, you know, in the readers. They're about getting eggs from the chicken coop and just things like that around the farm.
Milking the cow, different chores
working
on the
with
farm.
Siblings, just all sorts of things of that sort. And so our kids have really been able to relate to those a lot more than they would a lot of the other reader subjects. Yeah. So I really, really like those. But the other element that the Amish and the Mennonite books, curriculum books, tend to have is that they're really geared towards getting somebody out of school by about 8th grade. So they're focused very strongly on the foundations. And because of that, they just lay this beautiful, very comprehensive foundation on all the subjects, whether it's the English and the writing, or the reading, or the math. It's just a very, very nice foundation. And it's really geared towards a multi-age schoolroom, so that in that way they have a lot of they explain things as though the children are having to teach themselves through the curriculum.
So can you give, because you're using generality,
I am. I'm being general.
Can you give a couple, like, what's the curriculum?
Okay.
So that people know, if they want to look it up, what is a couple of the core curriculum names or book series that
these
that
are
you're
the
using?
Pathways readers, and these are great.
Readers.
These go through, they might even go through grade 12, but they are really solid readers, and they start at the pre-reading level. So we really like those. And the kids pick them up to read them just by themselves because they love the stories so much. This is one of the early level books, and I'm not seeing what the name of the learning numbers with Spunky. So this is
whoa, hey, we had some technical difficulties there, so we just filmed for about 10 minutes and realized that
we weren't filming.
So
so we're back.
You might not have missed us, but we missed us.
Yeah.
Okay,
so right back into the curriculum is where we left off. So we were talking about the reader, and I'm going to jump right into the math program that we use. And they're kind of a pair, they go together. There's the school aid math that starts off till about grade 2. And then the study time math takes over and goes through at least grade 8, if not 9, I'm not sure. But these are just wonderfully solid educational math. They have a lot of really good foundation in them. When you come away with your 8th grade level through this program, you are ready to start a business. Like, they really take you through all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
They go through business math at a light level. They get into
construction math pretty well from what I've seen.
Yep. They get into all sorts of geometry, a little bit of trigonometry. They definitely get through some pre-algebra. So it's a really solid introduction, pre-high school math.
And I love it because it's very, very real life applicable. It's not just running through equations, humdrum. They're learning real life principles and to think about math in those terms.
Right.
And for all that we do, just as entrepreneurs, as homesteaders, as just the diversity of life, that's much more important than just memorizing how to do some algebraic equation.
Yeah.
And it's much more fun for them, and so it makes it interesting. I mean, Tristan, he gets excited all of a sudden. He's telling me, I'm just learning this so I can come out with you and do that. And that really gives them great enthusiasm.
It does. It kind of takes care of that, why do I need to learn this thing that happens? Because they know exactly why they need to learn it, because it's so real life.
They see the purpose. Yep.
They really do. So that's a really solid math education. And again, one of the things that I really like about it is that the lessons are taught in a way that it's assuming a multi-level schoolhouse situation. So they're really fully taught in the book. So they don't need a full teacher-taught lesson in order to be able to understand the concepts.
Yeah, cool.
So I really like that. Now on the language arts side, we have just loved the Climbing Up to Good English series. And I really like it because it's a very strong on the teaching children how to communicate through writing. I really like that. That's a very good and well done.
And I think for me, that's along with reading, core math, writing, and as part of the communication. Reading and writing, being able to write well and communicate well to other people about what you're learning or what you're thinking or about what you want to do. And so that's been great, what I'm seeing them learn there. That's a very important skill to us in an overall education
absolutely
context.
Yeah. So we'll put the link to the curriculum company that we use. It's actually a website to buy different curriculum from the Amish and the Mennonite based curriculums, because there's multiple of those. For other curriculum we do the social studies, the science, handwriting, and you can find all of those on this website so that we don't get too
So you'll get that to me so I can get it in the description?
I will get it to you.
Okay, cool.
So you can get it into the description. Now, this is kind of takes us through high school for us, and it's so important for us to have these foundational things really solid in these early years, because for high school we have a little bit different of a methodology.
So this takes us to high school, not through high school.
Yes, this takes us to high school.
Right.
Yeah. And so as we get into the high school years, we kind of have a different theory there. You want to share something?
Right, yeah, they'll continue on with their core subjects, but they're going to do a lot more electives under structure that they get to choose. We'll choose some for them, but really that's where we want them to have a good enough foundation that they're getting to explore topics that they're interested in as far as what they're going to do for career, work, and hobbies, and so that there's a diversity of there. But we really want them to dive in so that they are experiencing some of that and discovering some of that in these years, not their early 20s as much. Hopefully they've had an opportunity to really explore and learn and find out some likes, some dislikes, and start helping shape that path. So high school is going to be a bit more dynamic.
Right.
But we're not there yet, so we can't completely speak to that.
Absolutely.
So guys, we got to get going. There's a lot here we could continue to cover.
Yeah.
It's definitely a big topic, but hopefully that is helpful, and it's been great hanging with you. I think we better bring 2 hats next time.
Yeah,
it's definitely
thanks for
bright
letting me
out.
use yours.
So
next week.
Yeah, next week. That's right. Is meal planning. You are going to be discussing meal planning, and you've got some promised recipe downloads.
I do. I'm going to have those ready for you.
And these are breakfast casseroles, which these are some awesome homestead meals.
Yes, they are. They make the mornings just run smoothly around here. So we will, if you have any questions regarding meal planning that you want us to cover while we're talking about
ask them here.
Ask them now so we can get them
or email
into
us.
Yeah. And if you have any questions about this talk, what we've just talked about, put them here too so we can answer something in next week's question. Make sure that you share, like, subscribe if you're not. We're almost at 100,000 on YouTube, so we're almost there. And
Sounds good.
We'll get him out of the sun.
We've got projects going. And,
time to go.
It's time to go.
Good
hanging with you guys. Goodbye.
Goodbye.